Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Grid Talk Talks the Grid. Today I'm joined with Amy, Charlie, Nell and Mila, and today we're going to be talking all things mental health since it's Mental Health Awareness Month and this week it's Mental Health Awareness Week. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about mental health, raise awareness for it and just make sure everyone's comfortable talking about it because there is such a massive stigma about it, and more specifically we want to talk about mental health in the motorsport space, and I think particularly we want to talk about mental health in Formula One. So I personally think it's not widely spoken about in F1, considering it's such like a mental game as much as it is physical, because the drivers are out there by themselves. And then if you look at something like Pierre's story and how open he's been over the past year or so, 2 years, it's, of course it's not nice to hear about, but at the same time it's quite comforting knowing that someone like Pierre can go through similar things as normal people or as fans. It's warming to know that other people can have similar struggles and that we're not alone, and that the more the people talk about it, the less taboo it becomes. So we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about different experiences with different drivers and how they have either battled mental health scenarios or raised awareness for it. So I'm gonna ask Amy to talk about her driver or situation that helped create awareness for mental health.
So I chose Nico Rosberg because if you've known me, I really love that man. And it's all about his fight between Lewis in that, especially 2016. So he had to get training with a psychologist every day for nearly 2 hours a day just to beat Lewis mentally, because there was so much going on. And it all started when his teammate was Michael Schumacher. And anyone that knows Michael Schumacher, he was the king of mind games. And I read, so Nico always has to pee before the qualifying, empty bladder, let's go. So Michael used to wait in the toilets, have the door locked and sit there timing him, because he knew he could get out just in time, jump in the car and go. But he knew Nico could not go on a full bladder, basically. And these mind games of, I can't do a qualifying on a full bladder, I'm going to think about needing to pee in the cockpit, basically. Like, all of these helped him. He was like, I'm getting done by my own teammate. I can't focus properly. So for this, he learned how to deal with these mind games that, going through seeking a psychologist. And because he's a very sensitive person, Nico Rosberg loves data, he loves analysts, and he just needed to know, why is he feeling like this? Why is he getting this emotion? And I think, and if you never watched the Nico and Lewis battle, the mind games were superior. They were so, Lewis and Nico hated each other at one point and they were so involved with each other. And it was learning how to beat Lewis and just going that extra bit. And I think he so struggled. And I also think the main reason he left the sport in 2016 was for his mental health and his relationship with his family, because he knew if he continued going, he was just going to break it, because he was too focused, too involved, and not looking after things that I guess I care about the most.
Really interesting how like the whole teammate thing actually has more of an effect than you might think on a driver. Like Lando openly came up last year, at the end of last year, and said and opened up with his struggles about anxiety as an F1 driver. He just didn't believe in himself. He didn't think he was good enough to be there. He was always comparing himself to his teammate. And yeah, I just think like that constant strain of, am I good enough, must be exhausting, like really exhausting.
Yeah, I looked into that a bit too. And the thing I liked about Lando, particularly because he did it, with the BBC, it was massive in the UK, so loads of people saw it, is I saw a lot of stuff online about how he'd encouraged other people to then kind of tell their stories. And it kind of, the thing I like is the fact that there has become a bit of a back and forth about the drivers have their own mental health battles, but they're also, particularly with Lando, there's a big narrative about how he is so important to other people as part of their mental health journeys. So as fans, Formula One has become, for a lot of people, what keeps them happy. When you don't get along necessarily with your families, or you're just struggling, there's always a whole family of people online who are just like you and support the people you support. And I think that's a really nice thing that's just starting to kind of come out a bit more as drivers talk more about their mental health journeys.
Yeah, more drivers are definitely starting to come forward, and Lando released an article with McLaren, and I think like the quote was, "Have you ever struggled with something mentally but hidden it from the world, putting on a brave face? I know I have." And that really hit home. Like, I'm quite open about like my mental health struggles. 1 in 4 people in the UK struggle from mental health a year. So like, I have anxiety, and it's just one of those things that I think it's a moment of realization that drivers are real people as well. Like, they might seem like these superheroes in a car that can do like almost everything, but they aren't. They are real people.
I can personally relate very much to this constant comparing yourself to others, because it's part of my job as well, being an actress. Every casting you do, it's always, are you good enough, or is someone else better? You are blonde and tall. There are 5 billion other people who are blonde and tall. And I can relate, because I know how much it sucks, because you have to concentrate on yourself. Eventually, that's the only thing that will help you. You have to do you. And I think it's so cool to see these people who are in a position that we admire, to really just be human and not put on a brave face and not act like, oh, everything is always glitz and glam over here. No, man, it's not. It sucks. And I think it's important for people to realize that, because we do put them on the pedestal all the time. And it's all right to do that. We are fans. It's amazing. They are great people, but they are also human beings, and we should not forget about that also as fans, because fans can, put a huge pressure on them as well. And I think we need to be very sensitive about that as well. And sometimes we forget, because we're just not in their position.
I have a question, actually, and this one's always quite controversial, I guess. Social media, do you think that has an effect on the driver's mental state, their well-being, before or after a race?
Definitely.
Things I was thinking about, particularly last year, there was the absolutely crazy driver market conversation going on for the entire season. And lots of people were announced. I was thinking about Giovinazzi and Raikkonen and that announcement, and it was pretty much entirely negatively reacted to. And they must all go through that, where someone says something, every second of the day they're seeing negative stuff about themselves, and that would get to anybody. Doesn't matter, I think we as fans, well, generally as people, can associate money with happiness. And of course, all of these drivers have so much money and lives that people could only dream of. But that, particularly last year, they were in a pandemic as much as everyone else was. And loads of them, Daniel was saying just the other day about how he still hasn't seen any of his family. It's been over a year. And no, that's not going to help anybody mentally, is it?
I think the trolls on Twitter, and I will call them trolls because they are, why can you expect a driver to be on social media when all they see is negativity about themselves? Like, I think we've all experienced if someone's in your mentions giving you hate, or like, you don't want to see it, it puts you in a bad mood, but you think we get maybe 1 or 2. Like, I know I've been on the receiving end, but they get thousands and thousands. So why do we expect them to be online when all they get is hate? And like, there's a fine line between criticism and hate as well. And I think people go over that a lot on Twitter, because it's, you're just hiding behind your profile. And I just think that needs to stop as well. Like, there's no point for it.
I think if we also look at like the case of Sebastian Vettel, the amount of hate that man receives on my timeline weekly is insane. First of all, it's just insanely disrespectful. A, because he's a human being like everybody else, but B, he's a 4-time world champion. You're really going to sit there and be a keyboard warrior and absolutely slag him off every week because he hasn't got the machinery to be as good as he is, or you're going to, you know, blow one mistake out of proportion. And I admire his strength to, I wouldn't call it strength, but his decision to not be on social media. Like, if I can imagine the type of person Sebastian would be on social media, I feel like he'd be retweeting petitions or like posting pictures of like his farm and his dogs, and, you know, it would just be wholesome content. But then you would just have those trolls that would just go nuts and have a literal field day with him. And I just think, is it worth it? What are you gaining from telling someone that they're shit or they're ugly? Or what does that give you personally? And if you find some form of excitement or happiness by dragging someone else down, or by pointing out their insecurities, or, you know, using something against them, that says more about you than it does about the other person you're abusing.
People make judgments. I can understand why drivers get very stressed out by social media, because people make judgments on one day or one decision, and the entire narrative, particularly on Twitter, completely changes. Like it happened to Yuki Tsunoda just, you know, in Spain, just in qualifying yesterday. He said one thing about his team in the moment, and the entirety of Twitter just went mental about it. And it happened to George and Valtteri a couple of weeks ago. You know, one person says one bad thing and everyone just goes completely against them, and there's really no reason for it.
No one is perfect, so why should we expect the drivers to be perfect as well?
I think it's really difficult as well, because F1 is an opinionated sport. It always has been an opinionated sport, and it always will be. Everybody's opinions on every single driver are completely different. You will never meet two people who think the exact same in any aspects. But one thing I always think about as well, not just the drivers, is the teams, like admins, but like behind the team accounts. Like yesterday, obviously McLaren didn't have a very good Q3. You go on and straight away it's just pure negativity, but it's not just slight criticism, it's just an outpour of negative comments, calling them names. What have they done? They're just there tweeting the results, like sat there, like they're probably gutted as well, you know, like it's as if they don't think that the team behind the driver is like, oh yeah, it's fine, that Q3 was shit, but it's fine, we'll do it next week. Like, no, they're probably heartbroken just as much as we are. So yeah, Twitter is definitely a toxic one.
Yeah. I actually just had a talk with a friend last night who is currently driving in Australia for Porsche, and he completely wrecked his car, sadly, in a crash after a restart, and they had to repair his car the whole night, and he was so mad and sad and was just like, fuck, I shouldn't have crashed, it's all my fault. And I think we underestimate how much pressure that puts on people, because he knew that if they can't fix the car, he's not going to race the next day. And that sucks. But you cannot travel back in time and be like, well, this time I'm not going to crash. No, you just have to look forward and get going. And I think this is where my example of a driver comes in. I had a look into Roman Grosjean's past, and let's be real, we all called him a crash test dummy at some point, because that man was testing all the walls everywhere in the world. But I think we underestimated how much that put pressure on his mental health, because we can't, like, who thinks he sat in that car being like, oh, today I'm gonna crash here, oh, tomorrow I'm gonna crash there. It's not something that he wanted to happen, it just did. Sure, sometimes he made mistakes. Sure, sometimes it was bad luck. But I think it made him look so bad. And it's interesting how he opened up about it and was like, I had to really take a step back and get out of that tunnel vision that I was in. Because at some point, the only thing he could see himself was, I'm gonna crash. Who are we kidding? I'm gonna crash. And my personal highlight this season is going to be when this man gets to sit in a fucking Mercedes, because he deserves it. He deserves all the love in the world. He's such a genuinely nice person. And I think it's crazy how he had to crash and literally almost die for people to be like, oh, he's not that bad of a person. I'm sorry, but are you kidding me? Like, that is not fair. That is not fair. And I mean, he had a very, very tough time with Haas. I think Gunther was also very hard on him, but for a reason. I mean, there's a lot going on in that team, but I think he's the primary example of how your mental health affects your driving. Because if you're scared of crashing all the time, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. And I was absolutely blown away when I saw that he got to sit in that Mercedes, because the chance of finishing his career kind of got taken away from him. And I'm genuinely happy to see him back on track. And I really hope that people give him all the positivity in the world, because he deserves it so, so, so much.
It should not take a driver to nearly kill themselves for the hate to stop.
Really. It's insane. It's insane.
On that, like I've seen events as well where people are like, when there was fans in the stands, whether they're booing or cheering for crashes and things, and quite a few drivers like through all motorsport series have like spoken up about that. I know that Lewis has. I think that was like 2016 with Nico. They were booing and he asked them to stop. And Marquez, like MotoGP, he came forward and was like we're human, please stop like cheering, like we're risking our lives for your entertainment, and the things that you're giving us is cheering when we crash. Like, actually what you should be giving us is a hell of a load of respect, because they don't have to be there. I know it's their passion, and I know people always say, like, especially with social media as well, they're used to it, it's their job. Like, that isn't an excuse. That is not an excuse. You should not have to deal with that stuff just because you chose that path for your career or your life.
I think the whole message of getting used to it is the exact wrong approach. You should not have to get used to it. Yeah. You should be in a position where it's clear to everyone. And I think it's very important that it's mentioned all the time that people risk their lives, because we tend to forget, because yes, it's so exciting and crashes are part of the excitement. Let's be real. Of course, I don't want to see people die. I'm not crazy, but of course it's exciting. But we should never, ever, 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 ever forget how many people already have died doing these things, and that the risk is still there, no matter if we have a halo, no matter if the cars have improved. People can die.
Mila, if you want to go in and delve in and give us all things Schumacher and mental health.
Well, Amy already mentioned that he was pretty good with like playing these mind games. So that's interesting. And obviously he's, for me personally, still the best driver to have ever existed. But I especially want to talk about the rivalry between him and his brother, which was super, super hard on his brother, especially because Ralf obviously was always behind. And I think we have a similar thing going on right now with Mick, where people just expect him to be awesome. And I mean, he is. Look at what he's done in that Haas for the past few races. But I think the name brings a lot of responsibility, kind of, which is very, very weird, because it's just a name at the end of the day. And we also have David Schumacher in Formula 3, who is the son of Ralf. And I think what I want to focus on is the fact that, of course, Michael is the best driver, but you cannot expect everyone else in that family to be just as talented or just as much of a GOAT or win just as many races, because it's almost impossible unless you're Lewis Hamilton at this point. So I think it's interesting, especially after the accident that happened to Michael, how his whole family had to take a step back from the name, because people were always asking, oh, so how is Michael doing? Oh, so what's going on with your dad? How is your uncle? What's happening to your brother? And it's like, it's such a sensitive topic. And we get it. He's famous. He's great. He's awesome. But I think people were, for a very long time, very insensitive about handling the situation. And they don't want to be asked about him. You know, they don't want to answer that. Whenever they are asked, it's just a brief answer that actually is no answer at all. And that has reasons. And I think, especially with Mick, it's going to be very interesting to see how he copes. Because so far, I think he's doing an incredible job of handling the whole situation. But I'm not sure if it's going to stay as easy, because the more he's going to be in this sport and the better he's going to get, people will compare him to his father all the time, even more than right now. And that could be a huge deal at some point mentally for him. And then we will maybe get to see another Schumacher rivalry once David maybe gets to join Formula One at some point. And I hope that people have learned from the past and have learned that you cannot put so much pressure on a name, that it's just not going to work, that it's going to make people crack. But I gotta say, like, for myself, as much as I'm excited to see it happening, I'm also kind of scared, because I don't want to see people break. And I think that's also a case that can happen with the Fittipaldi dynasty. There are a bunch of Fittipaldis driving all over the place. And it's like, I get it. It's awesome to see their names back in Formula One. I got goosebumps all over my body when Mick had his first race in Formula One, because Schumacher just made me crash, like all my emotions just out there. But we cannot forget that they are not their dynasty. You know, they're people, regular people, just human beings. Each is their own person. And I think that, yeah, there's just such a huge pressure and expectations that is going on. And I think another problem is that drivers have expectations themselves. You know, I mean, Mick is very open about not expecting a lot because, you know, the car is, you know, it's not the best car. We all know that. But I think there are other drivers in other teams who expect a lot from themselves and who expect to always be in like top 5 because they know their car could do it. But for some reason, damn it just doesn't work. And I think, sure, the pressure from outside is huge, but we shouldn't underestimate the pressure that drivers put on themselves as well, which is something we all can relate to, I think. The worst pressure is the one we put on ourselves, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who have to control that, and we just can't. But I don't know, how about you guys? What do you feel about these like dynasty names? Is that something you have an eye out for? Is it like for me, I said it's exciting, but it's also scary. Do you agree, or do you like disagree? What are your thoughts? I think it's so hard to judge, you know?
I think particularly if we look at Max, for example, it's the same thing. It's very similar, but Jos didn't have half the success that Michael did. I think it's nice that Mick and Max do have their fathers, or they were in Formula One together. They've grown up together. They can share their struggles. But then when you look at Max has already achieved so much more than his dad. And, you know, Jos isn't the best person in the world. But I think Max has done very well to disassociate that and look at him as his father instead of the racing driver. And he's done very well to have boundaries, I think, as well. And for people to say like, oh, but your father did this. And Max like, I'm not my dad. I am Max Verstappen. The last name is, and him being my dad is pretty much the only thing that we have in common. And I think for Max as well, I think he definitely has one of the best mental game in the grid. He's in a top performing car, but, you know, when he makes a mistake, it's literally like the next week he wins the race, and he's on it. But I think in terms of like a dynasty, seeing that, it's so nice to see, I don't know, a legacy, like particularly with like the Schumacher name. There's always going to be pressure on a name, even if like Paul di Resta has kids, or like if Jenson Button's children end up in Formula One, there is always going to be a comparison, because everyone likes to make a comparison. You know, it's sort of like a compliment in a way, particularly for Mick. It's sort of like, oh, you know, your dad was the best, and, you know, are you going to be like your dad? And Mick's going to be like, well, I'm going to do my best to be me. And if like I've got my dad behind me and I've got his legacy, like that's motivation and it's a comfort. And especially with like Fittipaldi's and, you know, Senna's, and, you know, you've got the Leclerc brothers as well. I think it's nice to see the families involved in Formula One, because for me it's quite a family sport. Like I grew up watching it with my parents, and particularly with my dad, and I think now with your granddad as well, and Charlie with your family, etc. And it's always a family orientated sport, and I think the more families we see involved, the more personal it gets, especially when, I'm going to try not to cry, when we did have that accident in Spa, you see the human element in it. And it brings chills to my body, even though, you know, I see Formula One as a family, and I think, you know, the more names you have in that, the better. And, you know, it's heartwarming to know that there are families and legacies continued to like see that Schumacher name again. Or with Raikkonen as well, like, because his son Robin is going go-karting, you know, hopefully one day there's like another Hamilton. You know, it just shows that this sport is growing, and it's going to have such an impact on the future of Formula One. And I don't think that's talked about enough, like the future of Formula One. Like, what does that look like? Are we going to have like 2 Hamiltons on the grid? Are we going to have like 5 Schumachers on the grid? Or like how many Schumachers can we get? You know, it kind of looks like that.
But
you know, I think it's exciting.
But equally, you don't want to create this legacy. You can only get into F1 because of your surname, because that's not fun for anyone. Like, you don't just want to see the same names over and over again. You want the best of the best. And I think going back to Mick, people forget Mick has created his own karting because his dad wasn't around to teach him because of the accident. And he shouldn't be compared to Michael. He's his own self. When were you compared to your parents? Like, you're not, and you shouldn't be. You're there to like create your own legacy, no matter who your parents are. And I also think for Mick, with the press especially being like, oh, how's your dad? How does that cope for him mentally? He's 21, and like when the journalist like, how is he? Mick just has probably a flashback what he is right now. How is that mentally doing him any good? Just thinking about his dad and the medical condition he's in.
I think what's quite nice for him though is that there's kind of, I think Vettel to a point has taken on a little bit of that father responsibility, because he was kind of in the middle, wasn't he? He was there when Michael was racing, and he's still there now. And I know Mick's talked a bit about how Seb Vettel is always there to help him out, and I like the fact that he still has that real, you know, father figure at the races, kind of like everyone else.
Like, Mick's been so open in saying how amazing Seb has been, and I don't think people give enough credit to Seb for that, because Seb's raced against his father, and also Seb's been in the sport for so long and understands it. And I think to have Sebastian Vettel as a role model and as a tutor, a teacher, you know, a friend is so vital, because he has experience under his belt. He's always so approachable. And I think that's going to help Mick flourish. I'm sure he doesn't need the help, obviously, because Mick is talented and he's probably been trained, you know, media trained. And, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if Mick does have a psychologist. I wouldn't put it past any of the drivers that, you know, that they don't have one. And I just think for him, that's going to be so nice to have. Like, I would love to have Sebastian Vettel as a mate. Like, I would love to ring him up and be like, this guy was a douche, like, can I have like some, consoling please? Or like, oh, I forgot to let someone pass at a mini roundabout, and that's all I can think about when I go to a mini roundabout. But do you know what I mean? Like, to have someone there that's kind of not your dad is so nice. And like, oh, I can't wait to see if social distancing and bubbles weren't a thing. Could you imagine how much content we would get between those two? Or because they're private people themselves, can you imagine the conversations that they have? I would love to be a fly on a wall and just hear them two speak. I would feel so calm. But yeah, what does everybody else think about Mick and Seb, or to have some form of role model in the sport, or someone that they can lean on to that's in a similar position?
I think not just role models, but for all the drivers in particular, they're away from their real families quite a lot of the year. Not just drivers, the teams as well. Like whereas the drivers do go home, a lot of the team members don't in between races. So there could be like months at a time where they literally do not see their loved ones. And I think it's just really important just to have like a core group of friends, family. And even if your team, like Lando in his article with McLaren, he came out and said his team is his family. Like, that is just that, and that they are the first people that he will go to if he's got any like worries. And it's not just on a work level, it's on a personal level. And I think that's really important. I hope that all the drivers have someone around them that they feel like they can reach to.
They can reach to me if they like. It's fine. I'm here to listen. So in terms of just being the last driver that's been quite open with their mental struggles, and again, I'm going to try not to cry, but not arsenic at the same time, is I'm going to talk about Daniel, because when you grow up with someone and you watch someone throughout the sport since their first race, it does hold a very personal thing to you. I am going to cry. I'm fully going to cry. Mental health to me is an important subject, and to have someone that you look up to just be so blasé and open about it is just so comforting. I am crying. I'm fully crying. I even put fake lashes on so I would force myself not to cry, but it's fine. So I'm sure most of you are aware, Daniel left Red Bull, and he was very open with his reasons why. Red Bull were chucking money at him and they were saying, come on, like, stay. And Daniel just said no, because being in that team for so long, and particularly with his last season, I can only imagine what he was feeling physically, mentally, like that season. I mean, as a fan, it was so hard to watch. And then you hear things like him kicking the door and punching things and getting so angry, and it's like, seeing your favorite person struggle like that is awful, and even to struggle yourself is quite hard. But for him to just be so open and just be like, yeah, for my mental health, I needed a change, I needed something different, I needed to do something for myself. Okay, maybe Renault was like a slight step back world championship wise, but if he wanted to do that for his mental health, then by all means I will support him in anything he does. Like, when he went to Renault, I can remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, and I was just like, okay. I was just a bit like, if that's what he wants to do, then I can't tell him no, can I? Like, he doesn't know me. Like, I'm just a fan. But when he's just been so open for it, and his helmets in particular, like, stop being them and all good always. I don't know if anyone saw my meltdown on Twitter when all good always came out. I was in quite a bad place, and when he put that video out and was explaining it, I lost my nut, and I was like, this guy just says the things I need to hear at like specific times. It's sort of like he's there, and I'm like, oh my god, like, I needed to hear that today. And his mental strength anyway is so good, and I feel like I relate to him in the sense that he's always this happy-go-lucky person, and he always bounces back, but he does have these struggles and he does feel them, and I think it's important that he does feel them so he knows how he can then move forward from that and be like, okay, because I'm feeling these, it doesn't make me weak, it doesn't make me a worse driver. Like, I know what I'm capable of, and I didn't do that today, but I can do it tomorrow. Like, his attitude towards life, to Formula One, you know, to his family, to his friends. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, it's okay.
Let it out. Daniel is the man. He is the greatest gift Australia has ever given us. His mum and dad should be pleased the day they made him, because he's the best thing.
And when he said, like, he's a hugger, I was like, oh my God, like, me too, guy. And I cannot tell you, when I hugged that man, I felt like, even if it was just for 3 seconds or whatever it was the best moment of my life. And like, when he talks to you, he pays attention to you, he looks at you in the eye, and he actually listens to what you're saying. Because he said, he was like, he knows how much this sport means to people, and he knows this platform that he has, and he knows how important it is to some people. And it makes me so happy that he gets it, and the fact that he's in a team like McLaren, who are going to look after him, who are going to, you know, who have this reaction to mental health, is so lovely and warming to see. And I definitely think McLaren are leading the way with mental health, you know, closely followed by the likes of Mercedes, and I think particularly the English teams are really on it. You know, with the charity like Mind, the stuff McLaren were doing last year is great, because they're bringing awareness to it now, and you know, the drivers are being so open with it. And it's, again, just so refreshing to hear Lando come out with his stuff and be like, oh my God, like, Lando suffers with the same things that I do, or we've been in similar situations. Like, to me, that's just, you know, nuts. And again, it reminds us that they're human, that we put them on this pedestal and we expect so much of them that, you know, we get clouded by real life struggles. We think, oh, they're Formula One drivers, like, they drive fast cars and they've got, like, you know, all these girls, all these fans, and like, you know, they get to do what they love for a living. But there's so much pressure on that to do something so well that you love. Like, I love my job, but I put so much pressure on myself to do well that I kind of forget that I love my job, or that, you know, sometimes it's like, oh my God, like, I'm really stressed, but I've done it to myself. And knowing that the drivers have that kind of similar mentality is so, again, just refreshing, that they can go through such similar things. And I feel like the more people come out with it and talk about it, the more people are going to be like, it's normal. It's okay to feel like this. It's okay to get anxious. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to make a mistake, and for you to become a better person from it and move forward. So my question is, do we think Formula One and the teams in general, or motorsport in general, is doing enough to create visibility for mental health, and to highlight the fact that motorsport, as much as it being a team sport, is an individual problem as well?
I think as a sport, like, not just F1, motorsport in general, I don't think mental health or mental well-being is highlighted enough as it should be. I think we hear a lot about how drivers prepare physically, you know, about like for races, and through all the summer, like, well, not the summer breaks, but through like the pandemic, we saw clips of them like exercising and stuff at home. But yes, I get it, they've got to be athletic. Actually, like, what I'm more concerned about is if they're okay. So McLaren partnered with Mind for the pandemic. It was for the coronavirus. It was to support everybody, like their team, just everybody who supports them in general. Their main goal was, through coronavirus, being at home on your own. But now obviously they've carried the sponsor over, and now they're using that to shine a light on mental health and to get people talking. And I think it has worked to certain aspects, but I don't think that all teams have quite joined in as much as I'd like to see them yet.
No, I'd say there is still, it's starting to improve. McLaren are doing a massive job in making it improve, but there's still such a big, I feel, responsibility on the drivers to say how they feel, which obviously no one should, have to come out with anything they don't want to say. But there's so much attention paid to, oh, this person's got a psychologist, this person's got a psychologist. It shouldn't matter. If any of them want to, whether they tell you or not, it shouldn't be up to a driver to say, oh, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. As Formula One, I think there needs to be an improvement in them talking about not obviously people's private lives, but just mental health in general. They can partner with more people. They can, speak to people after they've come out and said this stuff and pay more attention to it, rather than the responsibility being on 22, 23-year-old drivers.
I think what it is that a lot of people think that mental health shows weakness. And in sport, as an athlete, you don't want to show those weaknesses. And I think actually they're not weaknesses at all. Mental health is not a weakness. It's just a part of you. It's a part of your journey. And I think the more people that realize that, the more people that start coming forward, the more teams that work with Mind or other charities, then I think we'll slowly start getting to like the backbone of mental health for these drivers.
I think what you have to remember is, we've all kind of said that we've in the past or now have issues with anxiety or whatever. And these guys are all just like us, A lot of them are, younger than us, or, maximum maybe 10, 15 years older. They're all people who grew up quite similar to the way we did, being constantly in the spotlight as, drivers who are coming up in their careers. And yeah, I think as fans, everyone needs to remember they are just human beings who've been through all of the stresses that everyone else has.
I think ultimately what they did last year, also with racing as one, I think that includes mental health as well. And if they really want to make a change, the FIA should get involved, and not just the teams, not just the drivers, but the FIA, because there is a huge issue in motorsports generally that needs to be addressed when it comes to mental health and awareness. But it makes sense that most of the drivers do it on their own, because when we look at the sport, what we see is the drivers. They are like the image we have in our head when we think of the sport. So Lewis Hamilton, in my opinion, is legendary when it comes to raising awareness for different topics. I really appreciate that so much, even though not every topic he talks about is something I 100% relate to. But just to use the power you have for the good, I think that's incredible. And what I think is very important for people who struggle with mental health issues, they show that it's okay to get help, and that getting help is not a weakness. Getting help is you deciding that you want to make a change for yourself and that you want to get better. And ultimately, that's the most important step you have to make. You have to decide for yourself, I'm done feeling like shit. I'm gonna go out and make a change. It's going to take a lot of time and I have to work hard, but I want to do it. And that's something that everyone speaking up is really doing. They're sharing something very personal, but they're also sharing the importance of being aware and wanting to change that. And that's very, very important and very comforting, in my opinion.
I think as well, it would help if, obviously we're not part of a Formula One team, unfortunately, but it would be nice to hear how the teams support their own team. So the mechanics, you know, back to everyone at their own factories. You know, again, like you said, we literally only see the drivers and the people that go to the races every week. You know, the drivers are the faces of Formula One. I think it would be quite useful to hear. I think if people are comfortable, the more stories we hear, the more comfortable everyone becomes, and a less of a taboo it will become, and it will be seen as, you know, not a weakness. It will be seen as a strength, because it takes a lot of balls, a lot of courage, a lot of, you know, strength and, you know, mental ability to come out with what you've struggled with and to be so open about it. So it'd be good to hear what the teams do to support their own team and their, you know, from the mechanics to the drivers to, like I said, the people back at the factories. It would be good to hear what they do to support their employees, because it's not just the drivers. You know, there's more to a team than just the racing drivers. And I think to really, you know, hit home about mental health, we need to hear what the FIA are going to enforce, what the teams are doing back for every single employee, whether it be the cleaner of the garage or the rooms, or at the factory, to people like Max, Lando, Daniel. Like, how are they supporting their team mentally, as well as giving them a paycheck? Because there's only so much you can do for a paycheck before you suddenly go, actually, do I feel comfortable here? And you also got to think, you know, when drivers swap teams, is it just about the money? So if we look back at Daniel, it wasn't just about the money. He said, no, I need a change for me mentally. You know, even if he is dropping down teams, he did that for himself. Or if you look at people like, I'm trying to think of another example, but my brain has died. But I'm sure there are other, like,
even Kimi did the same thing when he left Ferrari, because he was like, this is too much for me. I don't want this anymore. Let me just go to Alfa Romeo and have some fun.
Oh yeah, Pierre. Oh my God, obviously. Like Pierre, if we look at Pierre, like he got demoted, but even to be in Red Bull and compete against Max is such a mental game anyway, that I think, not that we've brushed over, but I feel like that's a whole separate kettle of fish and topic. But, you know, to have that mental strength to go from one team to another and start again when you've, you know, built this thing up for yourself is quite hard. So I think, you know, when we did see that happen, we were obviously like, oh my God, like Red Bull culture is toxic. But we've only seen that with, you know, the drivers. What is it like as a team? Because you hear personnel, you know, sometimes changing and people pinching everyone, and you've got to kind of step back and think, okay, well, is it about the paycheck? Is it about the name of the brand? Or are there other underlying reasons that they've left? We hope you enjoyed this episode or episodes of Grid Talk the Grid today. We just want to remind everyone that it definitely is okay not to be okay. And if anyone is struggling, know that you are not alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, we are open to help you. My DMs on Twitter are open. Please feel free to even tweet the Grid Talk Twitter or message us. Please, we do not want to see you struggle in silence. We are here to help you. I will suggest that we leave some links in the description to help raise awareness. And yeah, if anyone ever needs to talk, either message us, reach out to help, and again, talk to your friends and family, check on others, always treat people with kindness, you know, have courage, be brave, deep breath, and smile it out is what I say. But we just want to remind everyone that it is okay not to be okay, and we want to raise as much awareness as possible to make sure that you aren't suffering in silence, and if you are, it's okay. We are here to help. There are things to help you. But also in saying that, we hope that Formula One and motorsport in general does continue to raise awareness for this, whether it be, you know, buying things or marathons or anything like that to raise awareness, to get people talking, is amazing. And we hope that the teams do continue to do this, and other motorsports as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. Please make sure you give us a like and subscribe. Make sure to follow us on all of our social medias. All the links will be in the description as always. And make sure you're following all of our personal Twitters, Instagrams and TikToks, everything as well. Like I said, that will all be in the description. And we hope you have a wonderful day whenever and wherever you're watching this. And yeah, just keep going.